This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Karen Hand. This week, when does medicine go too far? When are we playing God?
When in vitro fertilization was first made possible, people had vastly different views about that, whether that was a miracle or a terrible thing.
The ethics of human genome technology, when Radio Health Journal returns.
I'm Reed Pence, host of Radio Health Journal. If you enjoy Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show. Here's a preview of what they're covering on Viewpoints this week.
This week on Viewpoints.
We live in a time when advanced medicine wards off death far better than it helps us prepare for peaceful ones.
Facing our mortality and getting our affairs in order at the end of life. Then,
right now, AI is very integrated in everybody's life. We've got Siri in our pocket. We've got Alexa on our countertops. So it's everywhere already. And this is just narrow AI. This is AI in its infancy.
The reality of AI development. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Viewpoints on your favorite radio station, iTunes, and Stitcher.
Over the last 40 years, more than 5 million children have been born as a result of in vitro fertilization. Today, IVF is common and accepted by most of society, but that wasn't always the case. When it was first successfully carried out, many people and institutions, including the Catholic Church, saw in vitro fertilization as extremely controversial, a practice flying in the face of God and nature.
When in vitro fertilization was first made possible, people had vastly different views about that, whether that was a miracle that was to be celebrated or a terrible thing that we were all going to regret eventually. And we now know that in vitro fertilization now is something many people embrace.
That's Dr. Ting Wu, professor of genetics at the Harvard Medical School. She says many of the same ethical issues that once clouded IVF now surround another controversial medical advancement, the ability to edit the human genome. But this time, Wu and her colleagues have created a platform where scientists and the public can engage in discussion about this controversial issue.
I was pretty much a pure researcher until about 10, 11 years ago, working in the lab full-time, but always curious about how what we did in the lab was being translated to the general public, and importantly, whether scientists were getting good input from the public, which is whom we serve. And as the genetics field was moving quickly and genetic technologies were being developed, I think many of us felt that it was becoming more and more critical that this two-way communication with those whom we serve be ramped up.
Together, Wu and a few of her colleagues founded the Personal Genetics Education Project, or PGED. They provided curriculum and training for teachers, brief lawmakers in congressional hearings, run industry forums for companies producing genetic technologies, engage with communities of faith, and even advise Hollywood, TV, and film producers through the National Academy of Sciences.
It's a big task, but we really feel that it's doable, and our greatest goal is to make sure that all segments of society, regardless of their religious background, their ethnic background, their educational background, cultural background, that there is no bias and no one's left out of the conversation.
Wu is married to genetic researcher George Church, who endorses human genome editing technologies, but she says PGED doesn't promote or endorse genetic technology.
Our goal has always been just to make sure everyone is aware, and if they want to give input, to give input. But some individuals, obviously, the field is taking off, do find that genetic technologies will either allow them to help understand a particular trait or disease that they have. Genetic information can inform someone about their predispositions for certain traits or diseases. I think many people know that genetic information definitely advances research, which can produce therapies. And for some individuals, those, for example, who use pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, it gives them an opportunity to understand what the predispositions of that child might be. There are all different levels of empowerment or understanding that can come from genetic technologies.
Wu says that in the past, some segments of society were left out of the conversation where controversial issues were concerned.
Very little good has come out of that. And genetics being so personal, that leaving out could be especially painful. When people respond to being left out, lot of dark things can happen.
Wu points to the eugenics movement promoted by the Nazis during World War II as just one example. So it's no wonder people have fears today regarding genetic technology and its possibilities. Just because parents can now technically alter their genomes so their baby can be tall, strong, and smart, should they?
When I look back, I'm not a historian, but when I look back at the eugenics movement and what happened in Europe, it seems to me that if more people were aware of what is happening, with an understanding that gives them confidence to stand up and say no, we will all be safer. One can set up as many laws as one wants. In the end, whether people decide to follow that law or not, I think depends a lot on how well people understand why that law was put into place and what the implications are for not following the law. So I feel that hand in hand with regulation and oversight, hand in hand has got to be reaching everybody so they have an innate, confident level of comfort with making decisions for themselves, and when they see something not right, to feel comfortable standing up and saying no.
Today, there are laws in the United States regulating gene editing procedures. Many other countries don't have such restrictions. For example, last year, the first gene-edited children were born in China. And in Mexico a couple of years ago, a baby was conceived in the test tube using DNA from 3 parents, a technology that's illegal in the United States.
I think that is a very complicated issue that has a lot to do with just the culture and the history of a nation. I believe business comes into play. I believe individual beliefs come into play, of beliefs of individuals who have certain kinds of power. I think faith comes into play. So maybe the differences are reflecting just differences in our nations. I think it's very complicated.
Wu is well aware of the potential to abuse gene editing technology. Interest in our genetics is growing rapidly, perhaps too rapidly. For example, we've reported that direct-to-consumer genetic testing is growing at a rate of 10% annually, and we don't know where that interest will end.
There's a potential for people to use this in a way that currently we would say is beyond need and is more towards possibly greed. I also feel the greatest power that keeps power in check are the acquaintances who will respond to someone. Most people respond to those around us. And so if, let's say, someone starts to really abuse genetic technologies, it may be that what holds that person in check is those around him or her who know about genetic technologies, have thought about it, will actually corral that person and constrain them. That's why I think global understanding is perhaps our greatest source of safety and restraint.
You can learn more about the Personal Genetics Education Project and even add your 2 cents worth by visiting the project's website at pged.org or through a link on our website at radiohealthjournal.net. Our writer-producer this week is Polly Hansen. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Karen Hand.
Radio Health Journal returns in just a moment.
Do you know the signs of encephalitis? Nearly 8 out of 10 people are unaware that encephalitis is inflammation of the brain, a devastating condition commonly misdiagnosed that affects 500,000 people a year. Death rates from encephalitis are high, and survivors may be left with a lifelong brain injury. This World Encephalitis Day, the Encephalitis Society is raising awareness about the risks, treatments, and preventative measures of encephalitis, according to Chief Executive Dr. Ava Easton.
Most people don't know encephalitis can be a life-threatening condition caused by an ordinary infection or a person's own immune system. Symptoms vary, but can include a flu-like illness or headache, drowsiness, seizures, or the inability to speak or control movement.
So on February 22nd, wear red to show your support for World Encephalitis Day and those impacted by the disease. Find out how else to get involved at worldencephalitisday.org. That's worldencephalitisday.org. Brought to you by the Encephalitis Society.
At least 48% of all adults in the United States have some form of cardiovascular disease, according to new statistics from the American Heart Association. That's a significant increase over previous years, mostly because new guidelines mean many more people are now classified as having high blood pressure. Dr. Marielle Jessup is Chief Science and Medical Officer for the American Heart Association.
These updates are an important tool. The data have transformative power, holding us accountable and helping us chart our progress, determining if and how we need to adjust our efforts.
The report in the journal Circulation shows that cardiovascular disease remains the #1 killer of all Americans, claiming more than 840,000 lives in 2016. After decades of decline, cardiovascular disease deaths in the U.S. are once again on the rise. But there is good news as well. Smoking continues to drop, and the prevalence of physical inactivity has decreased by more than a third since 2005. Find out more at heart.org.
What are you going to do with your old car? You can try selling it, you could junk it, or you can donate it to Heritage for the Blind. Your car will be towed away for free, and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-835-1478. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats. It doesn't matter if your vehicle runs or not. It will be towed away for free, and you'll be supporting those that need help. Heritage for the Blind is a nonprofit organization that helps the visually impaired live fuller lives. Call right now to donate your car, and as a special thank you, you'll receive a free 3-day vacation voucher to over 50 locations. Call Heritage for the Blind right now. Call 1-800-835-1478. Donating is easy, and your vehicle is towed away for free. Plus, you'll get a free vacation voucher for donating. Call now, 1-800-835-1478. That's 1-800-835-1478.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Radio Health Journal is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and check iTunes for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find podcasts of our segments, information about our guests, and the latest health news at radiohealthjournal.net. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.